Sbu, thanks so much for your time. Yeah, suppose that's where we should start. I mean, what's been happening at Eskom? How has it impacted your job?
We are separate from Eskom. We are the pension fund. Eskom is our client. So we do, what happens at Eskom has got an impact in the economy. And as a fund, one of the largest funds in the country under the Financial Services Board, supervision, as well as under the Pension Funds Act, whatever happens in the economy does affect the investments that we do as a fund.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're independent, but as you say, whatever happens in the economy affects the investments. As a result of what's happened at Eskom, the economy has lost its ratings. We're now a junk status. People are very worried about the South African economy given the position that Eskom finds itself in. So, I mean, it must have had a bit of an impact on you.
Yes, it does have an impact. As a fund, we invest in various asset classes. We invest in the listed stock markets. We invest offshore. So if there are problems with the economy, it impacts the value of the fund. If we are downgraded to a junk status, there is impact in terms of the fixed income instruments, being the bonds that we hold. So those actually become affected, and it does affect the value of the fund, which in turn...
You invest in Eskom bonds?
Yes, we do invest in Eskom bonds. In terms of the law, we are allowed to invest up to 5%, but that's sitting at a very low level in terms of the investments. We are a fund of in excess of 140 billion. We probably have around about 2 billion rands exposure in Eskom itself, in the bonds themselves.
So, I mean, essentially, you guys are responsible for making sure that workers at Eskom have, decent pensions should they want to retire.
Yes, we are a DB fund, so ours is to make sure that we run the fund in a sustainable manner such that when members want to retire, we can be able to honor the liabilities of those members, because a DB fund works differently than a DC fund. In a DB fund, you've got a formula that you use to calculate the benefits. So irrespective of what's happening in the market, if those liabilities are out there, you still have to honor them as a DB fund.
I mean, Sbu, you did highlight your independence, but I have to ask, I mean, there was a lot of political interference at Eskom itself. Did you guys experience any form of untoward interference in sort of directing investments in a certain direction?
Not at all. We've got an investment policy statement that drives what we do. We've got a board that drives what we do. We've got committees that oversee the investments, and everything that we do, we have to make those decisions. Once a year we do an asset liability model study, which also tells us in terms of the liabilities that we have in terms of our members, and that also directs the asset classes that we have to allocate our assets into, and we've got return targets that we have to meet. So no one can dictate to the fund where to invest if it's not part of the investment mandate. And even those investments that fall part of the investment mandate have got to go through a very stringent and robust assessment process that is independently run by the fund to make sure that we protect the funds and the members' interests.
So looking at your asset allocations, I can see that the fund is heavily skewed towards equities. I mean, right here in South Africa, internationally, and on the continent. Can you tell us more?
Yes, we invest in equities, listed equities. A lot of it, almost about 40%, about 43, 44% is in listed equities in South Africa. Then we've got 25% of the fund, which we allocate to developed markets outside of South Africa. And there's a 5% allocation that is into Africa. Of the 5%, there's a split between unlisted and listed.
How hands-on are you in monitoring your investments? And I ask this because many corners have criticized the PIC currently for, essentially sleeping on the job in companies that they invest in that have been embroiled in scandal recently. I mean, VBS being the most recent one, but we talk about Steinhoff, we talk about Tiger Brands even, and even the Resilient Property Group. So I'd like to understand how hands-on you guys are and the extent of the research and oversight you have in the companies that you invest in.
We try an approach, an approach that says we need to be hands-on. We need to know what's going on. Every year we sit and we develop a theme, that these are the themes that we're going to be looking at this year. We attend AGMs. Even outside of AGMs, we engage with the executives and the boards to raise our concerns where there are concerns. The biggest approach this year, coming from the recent sagas that you've just mentioned of Steinhoffs and the likes, we're focusing more on the board dynamics. Because if you look at some of these failures, is where you get board dynamics where you've got a very colorful, strong CEO who is able to have his way around the board and to convince the board that, without the board holding him accountable or questioning him. So there's a lot of focus in terms of understanding those dynamics, and where we feel that the boards need to be strengthened, we will obviously, make the right noises, go to those AGMs and make sure that we use our shareholding, which we coordinate and collaborate when we go to an AGM to make sure that we can then exercise our vote to make changes at the boards.